Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what your process is, so
Yeah.
well, I guess there's no process.
There is no process, and that's what this is all about. Welcome to episode number 7 of the Undoing Perfectionism podcast. I'm your host James, and today I have my old schoolmate Ricky Kuruppu.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries. It's good to catch up. We reconnected after high school, and became closer, I guess, since then through mutual friends, which is really cool. So yeah, it's super awesome to have you on and get a focused conversation on creativity, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's through social media. You kind of catch a drift of how people change after school, and I just picked up what you were putting down, getting into your music, and just really focusing, I guess, on the self-development stuff. And that was something that I really found myself in, especially after high school. And I was just like, oh yeah, we have a lot more in common, and just became closer. And then I watched you put out a few episodes, listened to a few of them, and I was like, this is actually pretty cool.
Oh, good, thanks.
I've always enjoyed supporting the art of people I know, because it tells me something about them, and also I know where it's coming from, because it's like an authentic kind of place, because I know who like generally they are before this all started. So it's less of like, are they just presenting something for the world? Is this a character or persona? I'm like, no, this is them. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to kind of finally come on.
Yeah, awesome, man. So back in high school, what did you have any like creative interests around that time, or no?
Back in high school, I think my creativity, my outlet was interrupting the teachers and being that funny guy.
Okay.
There's this distinct memory of me throwing up yogurt intentionally.
Oh my
like,
god.
Pretending to like vomit, like
Yeah.
using yogurt to pretend it to be vomit, and then like pretending to cry in front of like the teacher when she came like check on me, and then everyone just like started laughing because they knew I was putting it on.
Right.
But then yeah, she didn't realize. She was like, stop laughing at him, and I was like putting it on. I was really upset, and like everyone was teasing me, and yeah, there's that. And there's also this memory of eating an ice cream, and then I was making such a mess of it. I didn't realize, but everyone started looking at me, and I had like the ice cream all over my face and mouth, and being darker skinned, it kind of really stuck out. And then everyone just cacked themselves, and they developed this thing called this slogan for me called "Eat It Funny." And even when I caught up with the boys last night, like one of our friends, Langham, he was like, Ricky, eat it funny. And that was the thing, whenever like I was eating, people would expect me to do something like that.
Okay.
So I've always been a bit of a performist comedy, and I'd say that was my first like outlet.
Yeah. That's because you wrote about that. Is that what was kind of the focus of your first book?
Yeah, there's actually a chapter in there called Eat It Funny, which is I think it was called Eat It Funny, and that was like about that moment I talked about really being the time where I was like, oh, I have a gift in terms of making people laugh, and making them laugh and being that funny guy actually brings me a sense of satisfaction. And also the cover of the book is actually me covered in ice cream.
Yeah.
That's what it's called. Like,
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because I didn't know where that actually came from.
Yeah.
So prior to that, like as a kid or anything, there wasn't anything, like it was kind of all just like through that experience in high school that your recognition of creativity kind of grew? There was
bits and pieces, like, I mean, before that, I was really into scootering.
Okay.
And I think that was another way to, like, express myself. But going back even further that, I was really into, like, action figures, as a lot of us are growing up. But I could really get lost in it for hours. And I would have storylines and do the voices and everything. And I even remember going into high school, maybe, which is where a lot of kids kind of grow out of it. I was still into it, and there was a bit of shame about that, but I realized I've always been a person that gets lost in my own world. And then as I've gotten older, I still get lost in different things. Yeah.
So when you started on your first book, looking back on all those bits and pieces of creativity, was there, I mean, you know, as a child kind of playing and just experiencing you're not as kind of conscious of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But was there anything in that getting lost that you applied when you started to actually work on something intentionally?
Ooh, yes, like it was a sense of giving myself permission to just put aside everything else the way you do with a kid. Like when you're a kid, like you make time and you just allow yourself to like get lost in it, and you're not thinking about other responsibilities and things you have to do. You know, you're just like, I'm getting lost in this, I'm enjoying myself. And that's really what I had to bring into my life as an adult, as I got older, and being like, just give myself time to like play, I guess is the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like not necessarily have a direct goal, like I'm doing this for this specific reason. It's like I'm doing this activity because I enjoy it. It's that present momentness rather than going like, you know, I want to write a book, I have a podcast to get this many subscribers, which will lead to this income and this deal. It's just like, no, put that all aside and return to that childlike, playful energy where you're actually just having fun, and that's the ultimate measure of success. Yeah.
So cool. So was your first book?
Yep.
What's the name of the first book?
It's called Living in Cream, a metaphorically messy guide to a sweeter life.
So good.
Yeah.
So was your first book was the first thing that you did like create intentionally as like a product?
Yeah, so just to give, I guess, everyone a bit of a background, my online alias is Boy Under the Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I started that blog because I used to have like write-in journals, like journals and journals. I've got now 10 years worth of journals at home. But one of my housemates back then was like, hey, you know, you're writing a lot in these books, like you should open a blog and share them with the world. And then I was like, yeah, okay. So I just hopped in front of a computer, and the Boy Under the Bridge sprung into my mind, kind of like just hit me, and I created that site. And then I would write blog posts. That was in 2013 about different things. But it was only when I went in 2014, I went to Tonga. So I lived in Tonga for a year.
Yep.
And before I went there, it just struck me, because I was originally going to like create like an ebook out of a whole bunch of posts condensed into the one file. But then I was like, I'm going to create like a completely new project.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as going over there, I had these photos done. And the photos were intentionally because I used to be into bodybuilding and fitness training in my 20s. And I knew that going over there, I was going to lose a lot of that size and athletic ability and how I looked. So I was like, I'll take some photos before I go, just to really, I guess, capture this achievement that I've done. And then I can kind of move on with my life. And then I met with a photographer, and he was like, I don't just do muscle fitness photos, like photos tell a story. You know, I want to know who you are. This is a chance to express yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm so much more than just a guy who lifts weights. And then all these ideas came to me that I could take a whole bunch of photos to really show my character, and then I could kind of combine it with my writing and create this book. And that's kind of what I did. So the book was like my first, and probably still to this day, my most biggest creative product and accomplishment.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
So you were writing the blog as Boy Under the Bridge before that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just had this blog, and I'd kind of write on it, and then occasionally people would stumble upon it, and I'd have these like conversation in the comments, and then they'd kind of like disappear onwards. So I never got too caught in like promoting it or pushing it. It was just something I enjoyed doing,
nice.
and I still do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you still post to that?
I still do longer form blog pieces, but since getting into social media, it's a bit easier on social media because people are already on the platform.
Right.
But then through social media, I can say like, hey, if you want a longer piece of content, go to the blog. But I do like YouTube videos as well, but and Facebook. But yeah, it's mostly, I'd say Instagram and Facebook is like the easiest way to have that day-to-day interaction.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So when you decided that you were going to write the book,
yeah,
because to me, like the idea of writing a book is like, holy shit, 900 pages.
Yeah.
You know, big projects like that.
Yeah.
I get like a big sense of like overwhelm immediately.
Yeah.
Was it that you already had a lot of material and you were just like, I'm going to put this into a book? Or was it like, did you have any goals in mind that you wanted to hit for the book, or you just, what was it?
I had like some ideas for the photos that I wanted to do. Like I wanted to capture certain sides of my personality and life, and then I was planning then to write about them. And I remember like I did the photos right before I went to Tonga, and then while I was there, the photographer sent me the finished photos, and as soon as I saw them, like something in me just lit up, and I was just like, okay, I'm energized. I'm feeling this kind of creative force running through me. And I was like, how do I start this? Because I'd never really written a book before, and I was like, I think I start by creating a title page.
Yeah.
So I just went to InDesign, I created file new, and I just took one of the photos and I just placed it on the cover, wrote the title, Living in Cream, and then it was like something took over me, and I just spent the next 2 months like hours on hours a day just typing away. I didn't even have a desk and chair, so I was just like sitting on my bed there with my laptop in the heat because I'm in Tonga, just typing away.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd write till like 2 a.m, sleep for 5 hours, keep going the next morning, and it was just kind of, it was a spiritual experience. Like I felt like the muse was taking over me, and this had a life or a force of its own, and I was kind of going on for the ride. And at that stage I was like 26, and I started the journey writing in the book from when I first had my first like depressive kind of episode around 22, following a breakup and a whole bunch of other stuff, and I started there. And as I worked my way forward and writing about what got me through those times, it was really cathartic because I was reliving things and reprocessing it.
Yeah.
And then being away from Brisbane on another island, on a different country, island, it physically gave me perspective on everything as well. So it was an incredibly just like healing journey to revisit things, and it's full of puns and jokes. So a few times I'd just be cackling to myself at how funny I was. Yeah, and then just putting it together was just like, it was a pretty amazing feeling. I still remember the first time hitting like upload. I was in a cafe and I just hit like upload to Facebook, and part of me was like, okay, the blog Boy Under the Bridge used to be anonymous. Like I was writing through an alias, but the book has like my face on it. Like I'm there covered in ice cream without a shirt, and I thought to myself, will I regret this? Because things on the internet don't go away.
Yeah.
I was like, will I regret this? Then I thought about it. I was like, you know, why should I care about like my career, not getting some sort of office job, when this is a chance just to show up in the world as myself and own my story. And basically a lot of people did not know I had trouble with like, depression and all these heavy feelings, because I was the funny outgoing guy. So it was kind of like my coming out story for like a lot of darker stuff as well, and really tackling that stigma around we don't talk about this, or as a man appearing vulnerable. And
that's huge, man. You spent the 2 months and you were like in the zone, and it just came out. So when was there just like a point when you're just like, this is the end? Did you just feel that part as well?
Yeah, I worked through the main 5 kind of chapters that I wanted to talk about. Like there's a part where I talked about dancing, which was like another creative thing that I came about in my life, learning to dance. Like initially I missed my high school formal because I was terrified of dancing. And then while I was in Thailand, I saw this kid like popping and locking in front of a mirror in like this store, and I just had this vision of like, he's teaching himself to dance. I've always wanted to be able to dance. I'm going to learn and teach myself to dance. And eventually I did that. So I told that story, the fitness thing, because I mean, high school I was kind of like one of the slimmest, smaller guys. And then after high school I just discovered bodybuilding. So I talk about that. I talk about journaling, how I discovered journaling and how therapeutic that was, and then that chapter called Eat It Funny, which is about humor and embracing my comedic side. So I talk about all these things, and then when I got to the end, it just kind of naturally wrapped up. Yeah
So good, man. That's so cool. So when was it you first did, I remember seeing that the first time you did stand-up comedy. Have you ended up making that a regular thing, or was it just a couple of times that you did that?
I did stand-up comedy just the once. Well, I did it once before I went to Tonga. I did stand-up, but I had everything written down on a palm card.
Okay.
So I felt like I was kind of like cheat moding it a bit.
Right.
And then it was in 2019. It was actually following a run-in with someone, I met online, a woman, and things kind of fizzled out. I was a bit down on myself, and I wanted to rediscover my mojo, and I thought I'd do that by throwing myself into something. So I went on to found like an open mic session.
Yeah.
Threw myself into it, and once I actually signed up, then I wrote, a 5-minute set.
Yep.
And this time I was determined to up my creative challenge and not actually read off palm cards, but actually memorize and deliver like a full kind of piece skit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. How was that? Like how was the prep for that? Like,
it was intense because I really just wanted to be able to go up there and deliver, 5-minute routine. And I remember I recorded myself doing it, and then I would listen to it like in my headphones. And I remember like at lunch at work, I was kind of like walking around, and my colleagues saw me talking to myself, and they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But like they were like, is Ricky okay? He looks like he's talking to himself. But secretly I was going around, like walking around, just like practicing this routine to get it down. So of course when I got there, the nerves just took over. And like the adrenaline was just crazy. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have a coffee. And I was like, no, I'm too buzzed now. I'm gonna have like a drink to bring me down. I was trying to like get the level.
Yeah.
And this kid there was like, another kid was like, do you want like a Valium? I was like, no, I'm okay, mate. Like, I was like, but I did deliver it like without any errors. Looking back, I can now see how I probably try to cram too much into the 5 minutes.
Okay.
But I learnt a lot, and I learnt that the biggest fear really is just getting up there. And once you can be okay with the idea of just being up there and being looked at, and you can work with those nerves and you can just relax, you're good to go.
So it sounds like you practiced pretty well for it. Like
I did. I went over it and over it, because it kind of was like a scripted routine. Everything led into something else. Some people went up there and they just delivered individual jokes.
Yep.
And they were more comfortable. Like on stage, they were kind of like, oh yeah, that one didn't go too well. Here's another one. Really relaxed. I was kind of like, I'm here on a mission. But you try something and then you get the ability to kind of course correct.
Yeah.
I feel so. I do want to give it a go again, and this time I think I'll do like triple as good.
That's so cool. So you booked. Did you have like some idea about what you would do in a comedy skit before you booked it, or did you just book it and then be like, well, I've got to do it now?
I think I just booked it, hey.
Yeah.
And I just thought like, what can I talk about? And then I just talked about my life. Like I think a big part of it was dating, if I remember. Yeah.
Were there like jokes that you used when you did the palm card thing years ago that you reused?
No, this was all just fresh stuff. Yeah. And I talked about like Tinder and stuff. And one of my friends, like, I just wanted to talk about. I'm inspired by comedians who just talk about real life, like their everyday stuff, but give you a different perspective on it.
Yeah.
And there's a comedian called Daniel Sloss who's funny, but at the same time, he has these moments where you kind of go silent and you think, and you're like, wow, like I'm learning something here.
Right.
So given what I write about in terms of like, the philosophy and life stuff, I kind of want to combine that with a bit of comedy.
Yeah.
And one like thing I talked about was like this thing called the hour of death. And it's like when you're talking to someone on a dating app and then like you text and you're kind of like, oh, I haven't got a reply yet. And then something in you just goes, this is it. Like it's been too long, you know, like, because to be honest, who doesn't have their phone on them, you know?
Yeah.
And I make the joke that like, if someone hasn't died and that's the reason why they haven't replied, then like it's the hour of death, like it's over for you. Like you just know eventually you're going to get this reply like 3 hours later about like, hey, sorry, I didn't have my phone on me, ... I can't do this weekend, or it's just over, and like a lot of people laughed and found that really relatable. So
good.
Yeah.
So moving on from the second book.
Yep.
There was a fair bit of a gap between the first and second. The second one.
Yeah. So the second one was more a little snippet of poetry. So during the lockdown period in Melbourne, I had been going around, like one thing I did was I had a typewriter.
Yeah.
So I would use this old typewriter to create these like snippets of kind of poetry and like quotations that I would write on this kind of rustic paper, and then I would stick that on the street. So it's kind of like inspired by, you know, street art and Banksy and all those kind of things. And that was the thing that I did. And then during the lockdown period, because I had my Instagram handle on it, people would come across this stuff and tag me and then be like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I just found this on a street pole.
Yeah.
But during lockdown, there's a lot of people hitting the streets, walking around on their 5-kilometer radius track. And they were doing that a lot often. And then people were like, hey, you know, I was pretty bummed out with lockdown. This brought a bit of novelty and joy to my day. And then I created this little treasure hunt out of them using the running app Strava.
Yeah.
And then following the attention from that, I kind of combined all of the things I'd written into this little like poetry zine. So compared to the first book, which I professionally printed, this was just like this thing that I did at Officeworks stapled together, and it's called Just My Type.
Cool.
Bit of play on words. Yeah, and then that was like my second kind of thing that I created, and following that, that thing that I did, I got picked up by a journalist, and then I was in the Age newspaper. And then the next day I got a call from Channel 10 to be on live TV, and then all these people were like interested in what I did, so I had this little poetry thing, and I was like, hey, I can like post this out to you, which is like, you know, a pretty cool experience to get noticed in that way for like this kind of creative thing that I was doing, and also to actually make a difference with it. Because I think over the years, when I've always been a creative person, but I've also realized that there's a bit more fulfillment from it once you're able to give something to the world from it. As we're recording this mic, you know, on your bedroom setup, I actually think back to when I was early 20s, I got a mic and I would record raps in my bedroom closet.
Oh yeah.
And it was fun. Like, I enjoyed the play on words and rapping about things. It was a bit funny and that, but at the same time, it was just entertainment. It didn't really offer any people anything of like substance.
Were you sharing that with people though?
I did, yeah. Like, I put it on like SoundCloud and upload it, and I had a lot of fun with it, but that's probably, you know, I didn't really derive any meaning from it. So when I took my interest in words and writing and then moved it towards the blog and that, also I just was kind of horrible. I didn't have the voice for rapping, but my creative process evolved. Like, that expression with words and what I was interested in kind of has found its peak formation or its release in, you know, The Boy Under the Bridge and the kind of writing I do now. But yeah, the whole process with the lockdown, what I did, like, you know, brought me this great sense of meaning. I realized that that's something that I want from my creativity as well, to be an artist who gives something to the world, kind of like with what you're doing with you know, your podcast. It's like a creative pursuit, but also you're giving something to the world, like you're helping people along the way, and it's kind of bringing everyone together around something. Yeah,
I mean, I guess I just kind of got to a point, I'm like, well, I understand the value in sharing things with people, and you know, it's been super helpful for me. So yeah, there's no point in keeping it all to yourself. Keep all this personal development to myself when someone else could be, you know, learning from it. So I didn't realize that that second book was actually kind of more of the child of your The Boy Under the Bridge escapades. So that's cool. So when I want to know how The Boy Under the Bridge like started.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because like, you know, it's a totally unique thing. You know, it's like, you've got it. So you had a type. What came first? Did you have the typewriter, or did you have the idea to find a typewriter and then put stuff out?
Well, in terms of like, I don't think we touched on it, but the alias of Boy Under the Bridge that came to me was because the Gateway Bridge. Yeah. So there's actually in Brisbane, there's a path underneath it that I went with one of my friends, Steely. We went under. We were just going for a walk in the area near Cannon Hill, and then we stumbled upon this path, and we followed it down to be under the Gateway Bridge. We're like, oh, cool! Didn't know you can actually come under here. And we just sat down there as the world would speed by above us, you know. And then from there on, I would just go there by myself, because I found myself really just relaxed, a place to be away from the world, think about life, journal. And then also, like, then we came to creating like a blog or having an alias. Like, I guess it's a bit of play on the words. I think it's called Innocence, when BBB's a boy under the bridge. But the terms of why I chose boy rather than like man was because I wanted to kind of capture that child archetype that, like when I touched on originally, that playful self that isn't really concerned about the future but really engrossed in the moment. Yeah, and also children see the world through, you know, a view of they're really optimistic. I think they have a lot of belief in themselves, and I think at their core they really are just well-meaning and endearing.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, that's why I kind of used those words. But then the idea for the typewriter and all that kind of stuff came when I moved to Sydney. Street art was a pretty big thing there. And I was like, this is cool. And also Instagram was kind of coming up, and a lot of people would write on Instagram, but they'd use these pretty tacky like typewriter fonts. And I just saw that. I was like, you know what? It'd be cool, instead of like, you know, trying to look like you have a typewriter, why don't I actually just get one? And then I found one, and then I would type on these like pieces of card. And then, like, the way people kind of stick things on the street for street art, I was like, I'll contribute to that by sticking snippets on my writing around the place. But also, I do it on card and then with blue tack, because it's not actually, like, damaging anyone's property. And also, people can come across it and be like, oh, this is cool. Like, I just found this thing. And sometimes it's got a bit of synchronicity, because people often find something and they're like, I'm going through this experience right now. Like, people have messaged me and was like, someone was actually legit said, I just came back from breaking up with my partner, and I was walking home and I found one of your snippets on writing about like closure. And you know, like, this spoke to me, and like, thank you. And also, like, I've taken it home with me, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, that's what it's there for.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so powerful what you're doing with that. And there's no wonder that it got picked up by the news. I mean, I'm a bit against conventional media, not gonna lie, but so I found it really quite interesting that you actually did end up on there. And I, you know, compared to this kind of atmosphere that we've got with this casual podcast, compared to, you know, I remember watching the interview and thinking like, oh, why did they have to be so, you know, clunky and you know, we're the news, so we're going to ask you a question like this. You know, I feel like you lose so much of, you know, the real heart and I don't know, there's so much more that they could find out. But obviously, sorry news, I know that you're limited to your 2 minutes that you've got to interview someone, whereas we have as long as we want kind of deal. So
I did feel that, like, you know, when I did the Age article, a journalist called me up, and we got a chance to like talk for half an hour and just kind of talk about it, and then he chose which snippets to keep in that. But then when I woke up the next morning to be on live TV, you know, there was no prep, and I just, you know, was there, and I was like, shit, this is like literally 5 minutes. And the question, I felt like they were just like, hey, we've got to fill this slot, let's get this guy on who's doing this nice thing. But deep down, I didn't feel like they wanted to know who I was or anything, which is why when opportunities came to be on, like, I was on like the ABC radio to actually like elaborate, I really appreciated that, because I was like, there's so much more than what people just saw. Like, there's a story behind why I'm doing it, how I started, and also the fact, like, the most important thing is like, people are like, oh cool, like, you do this creative thing and you can be on the news. It's like, no, I didn't just start this during lockdown in 2020. I'd started this 5 years before,
as a blog,
as a blog, but also doing the street typewriter thing. I've been doing that for a very long time. And then during lockdown, it happened to get picked up. But like, I've been at this for a while, so it's cool to actually get some sort of recognition. But like, you gotta be able to, if you enjoy something, you gotta be able to stick it out and carry on with it, regardless if no one really notices you. I think, you know, because, you know, I wasn't getting big or anything, or getting, you know, heaps of traction, but I still was enjoying it, so I kept doing it.
So you've been doing it for, I didn't realize that you've been doing it for that long as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to putting out these things into the physical world, do you ever have like an amount of snippets you want to get out there, or is it very much like, this has got to go out in the world when you stumble upon something? Or?
It's like when I spoke about like writing my book and feeling that kind of creative force take over, I try to tap into that when I'm doing my typewriting as well. I know one thing I don't like about social media and the algorithm is that it's like post every day, post at the morning, post in the afternoon, you know, like post about these topics that are trending. Like I just kind of try to put that aside and be like, what do I feel? Like what's actually speaking to me? Stepping out of that and then stepping aside, and then letting it, whatever comes through me, usually to what I'm feeling. So I feel, people ask me like, are you writing about yourself? I'm like, sometimes I'm writing about what I'm going through, but also it's kind of like something that people might be experiencing on the collective. Because I feel as like an empathic person that I talk to friends and then I pick up something about their experience, then to kind of process that, I then write like, you know, if someone was going through like, you know, redundancy or a breakup and they'd been talking to me about it, I'd go home and the next morning I'd be like, I feel this coming through, and I'd write about it. But then someone would be like, hey, you know, like, is everything okay with you and your partner? So you wrote this thing. I was like, no, we're sweet. But this is actually, I think I've written it for someone else. Yeah, I think that's just the same way like artists, musicians, for example, write these albums, but they're not always writing about themselves. They're writing this song, they're writing it for people, and that's why so many people like their music, because it speaks to them. Yeah.
It sounds like your art is a lot more from like feeling and emotion than some of mine is at the moment. Like some of my stuff is very much just like, I have a backlog of lots of miniatures that I really want to paint and get them done because I've never finished them. Yours is very much, it's like it's coming. And do you ever think very far ahead about what you're going to release? Or?
With this not poetry, because it's kind of short, I can just wake up one morning, grab a coffee, sit in front of my typewriter and just type away. And one thing that I like, people ask, why do I use a typewriter and not like my phone or a computer, is because the typewriter, you can't go backwards. So once you've started, you can only go forward. So it puts you in a train of thought and it forces you to finish, and you can't sit there and rewrite.
So good.
So that's a reason why, because I think if I just sat in front of a computer, I'd just delete backspace. So typewriter's like, okay, I'm finishing this no matter what. Like I've lit the fire, and like, you know, it's like a stick of dynamite. Like the fire's traveling and it's got to reach the end. Something's going to happen. So I like the way it forces me to kind of be on the spot and come up with something. I
didn't even think about that with the typewriter.
It's an interesting one to realize how the tools that we use affect our creative output. Like one thing I think I respect about you is that you've got the guitar work, like the music, and then you got the podcast, which is like a language tool, and then when you're doing the miniatures as well, like you're using all these different parts in your brain. And I've been heavily word based, and I've been trying to, like, as a creative person, go like, I need to step into other outlets, like kind of like I've enjoyed dancing, but like dance more in the morning and really try to express myself through that. Or I want to get like, you know, pens and pencils and like just do the coloring, like you work with color and the painting, like find other avenues to then, like, I guess, stretch my boundaries, because I feel working with words boxes me in. Because I'm like, oh, I don't know any more words, but I want to, like, open up other avenues, and then I think that then when you come back to the words, I'll have a different perspective to offer.
That's really cool. That's something that one of my previous guests, Kristen, did talk about a little bit, about how our other experiences affect our creative outlet. So it's really cool that you're like straight away just like, I love words and words is my jam, but what if I stepped into another area to kind of like give your words potentially another flavor?
One of my favorite bands is Tool, and Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer, like, people were on, because Tool's been around since like 1980 something, like they're on their 1993 they started, they've been on their case because they didn't release an album for like since 2006, so it was like 13 years there was no album. And I remember him saying that, like, people were like, oh, this guy's out there making wine and doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and doing all these other things, like, get back in the studio and make music. And then he actually said in an interview, like, people don't understand that as a musician you can't just sit there in the studio putting out music, because you got to go out there and live, because your experiences other experiences then give you something to bring back and share through your music. So yeah, I feel like, you know, trying other things gives you something to actually go back to your original output and like bring something unique. And at times like this year, I've been struggling with trying to like keep up with the algorithm, and I felt like it was taking over my creative output. I felt guilty about not posting every day, or just running myself dry. And then I thought like, hey, I'm going to take some time off completely, not feel guilty about it. Just go live my life, read books, talk to friends, listen to podcasts, and then come back. And I've realized that, hey, living renews my kind of creative juice, and I have then something to write about.
Yeah.
Because if you just sit in your bedroom typing away with the typewriter, you're going to run out of things to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have, after the 5 years of releasing stuff, you have felt some times where it's like, oh, I don't really have anything at the moment.
That's usually when I've been trying to force it, like type every day. So I just go like, hey, I'm going to take a week off, 2 weeks off, and even not look at social media as well.
Yeah.
So I find that then on some kind of subconscious level, my brain's like, oh, write about this, or trying to copy or feel even threatened by other people, you know, which is a natural thing to kind of compare yourself. And then I go like, no, step away from that, because I've got my own creative vision and voice inside of me. I just need to listen to it.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So you've got a bit of energy going at the moment. You got some stuff coming out.
Yep.
What's on the horizon? Did you feel anything?
So after I wrote Living in Cream, which was about my life from like 2010 to 2014 up till I went to Tonga, I told myself that I'd write like another book. And then because from Tonga, you know, the next year I came back, then I moved to Sydney for a year, then moved to Melbourne, then did this trek through Everest Base Camp and did all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm ready to write the second book, but I just haven't found the time to really sit down and do it. Like I've started it, but like when I went to Tonga, I was kind of on an island. I was like, you know, away from technology and all this thing. So that's been sitting with me, because I've lived a lot, like the last 5 years. I've been pretty insane, but like I've got to really sit down, and it's called Home. And I think the subtitle is like a book about returning to yourself, because as I've gotten older, I've eventually just realized like the way forward really involves just coming back to who you are as a person and looking back at your life and being like, what's been consistent the whole way through, you know, like who have I been from the start, and realizing like that's my essence, rather than going in the world and trying to be this and trying to be that. Just being like, who am I? Like the seeds of that, I guess you could say, soul were planted really early. And one thing I like about coming back to Brisbane especially is that I meet these people who have known me since I was a kid in high school, and they remind me about who I was, and I really feel blessed to experience that. So that's the project that I want to really finish off. But at the same time, since I've been doing a lot of the street poetry and on Instagram, I kind of came up with an idea for a book called Words and Their Textures.
Yeah.
Because I realized, like, while I could write these things, these poetry pieces, where I place them and like the kind of shot you organize also says something about the words. And also, like, when you're on the street, you see like a brick surface, or you see a wall that's got like, you know, the paint flaking off, and I feel like the kind of textures of the street also speak to you. Yeah. And while I was doing the street poetry thing, I came across someone who found a lot of my pieces, and her name was Lisa. And she goes around and captures a lot of street art, and she would kind of place them and compose them in ways that made me think about like, hey, how you place, you know, a piece of poetry on a canvas or on the street says something too. And then it hit me like, hey, I should do like a little kind of a coffee book, a hard coffee book called Words and Their Textures. Will just be a collection of like my snippets on the street and different shots. So that's the kind of thing that's landed with me. So I'd say I'll probably do that. And then after that, I'll get around to finishing Home, because I feel like with Home, I wanted to reach a point in my life where I'd hit like a kind of an end point. And then I guess my decision to return to study counseling has kind of been like, hey, I'm at a point in my life where I'm taking everything that I've done with Boy Under the Bridge, but also who I was as a person, and kind of like bringing it together to be my way forward in the world.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, now I can use that as the end of home.
Wicked.
So I'm like, okay, I've got that skeleton thing tracked out. So yeah, hopefully I'll get around to doing that.
Yeah, I like those ideas.
Yeah.
I feel like from my guests, I get a little bit of, I get kind of half is more of like an empathic kind of creative background, and then I'll get some people who are a little bit more about deadlines, and obviously I feel like you're very much on like the feel side, which is really cool. So, you know, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So you've obviously got these couple of ideas, but you're not the kind of person that's like, I must get this out in these 2 months. You're very much like, when this idea is filled out and it feels right, you'll put it out.
Yeah, I've kind of realized my creative zone is like pieces of paper all over the floor. The room's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
The messy studio, that hurricane environment is where I work, and I really respect people who are like, I've got a deadline, I've got to get this by this date. But that's just not how I work. Like, I need to feel it, otherwise it's kind of like a real struggle to get things done. But I've gotten to the point where like I trust my kind of subconscious self, and also the timing of things to naturally hit their kind of point of fruition when the season and the conditions are right. Because I feel like if you force yourself into making something like work, it might take the joy out of it. And at this stage, it's just like a hobby. But if I had like paying clients or something, like if I was, in design or, producing audio, I understand, deadlines count. But when it's like a personal thing, I feel like, hey, have fun with it. Like, when you're feeling it, it'll happen.
So good. Because, they sound like very, like, fleshed out ideas.
Yeah.
And, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, I have lots of ideas, and I could totally just release them as they are.
Okay, yeah.
But, I tend to get attached to that feeling of something not being done, and that's why I feel like I've always had this like backlog of projects and ideas, because I've like got this idea, I've got some bits and pieces there, which to a lot of people it could seem as a complete thing, but it's my perspective of it and me not feeling that it's ready, that I kind of give to a lot of projects, which is one of the things I kind of struggle with. So could you try, I know it's difficult, but could you try and like describe when, say, obviously your first book, you had that time away, which was very physical and very, like, that was a kind of forced, regimented kind of scenario. So even with like a snippet, what does it feel like when you've got a couple of sentences there, and you know that like this is what's going out? Is there a way that you can describe when to call something finished?
Yeah, I guess like using the physical typewriter, it's like when I've hit the end and I'm like, well, this is physically done.
Yep.
But then I understand there is a thing that sometimes afterwards you kind of look at it, you're like, oh, okay, I'll change this and this. And there's been times where I've taken a piece, a concept, and then reworked it.
Okay.
Reworked it a bit. And I think what I've found is that sometimes I've finished something, I type it, I'm like, I'm glad to at least hit the end, but I know there is a sweet spot where it's like, it's like, like that kind of like...
When you know.
Yeah, like, I guess it's like with music, when you're like, you're working on something and you just like, this is it, like, it's like, I guess when someone pulls something out of the oven that they make and they taste it, and it's like, it's not, I'm like, this hits home. And like with words and that, it's like, cutting out a word can make such a difference, and adding one in, and it's just, you kind of know, but at the same time, like, it's funny, your project called Undoing Perfectionism.
Yes. Like,
I have friends who, they're envious of me, like, they're talented writers, but their challenge is that they're too perfectionist, so they can never just ship, they can never just put it, whereas I'm like, I'll go like, this is, I'll go with this, I'll take it out, I'm willing to do that.
Right.
Where I think, perfectionism, you got to balance perfectionism with being that ongoing drive that makes you drive to it, get better, but also not being something that just holds you back from ever stepping out they're ever putting something out. Because I've heard of people who've been working on things for like, years, and they're just like, oh, it's not perfect yet. Then it just sits and gathers dust. I'm like, hey, it's, as it is, it's still something,
Yeah.
And I guess my looseness with perfectionism definitely gives me an advantage, because I'll sit there and be like, oh, I've got 5 minutes, I'll type something. Or sometimes with my Instagram posts, I'll be on the train, and in a way, I know the train's going to take 10 minutes to get to the city, and I'm like, okay, 10 minutes on, I've got to finish this by the time I get there. And I'm like, this will do, and I just post it, so I don't sit and miss. So it's like balance between the two. But to answer your question, it's like I can taste it, and I've come to realize that like you can't always hit the sweet spot every time. You got to be willing to be like, the rough drafts are part of the refinement process. So you're just working through those till you get, naturally you'll just get better. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I like to ask that question, although it can be a little bit hazy, but I think, thanks for answering that. I think you've done really well, because that's exactly like the same boat that I get in, where it's like, I have some music sitting there. I've got 2 verses, a chorus and a bridge. That can go out. But then I'm like, oh, it just doesn't have, it doesn't, and it's like, it's constantly going back to the draft, and then not literally just getting it out. Or like, painting a miniature, I could sit there and like, rework it a million times. But I'm kind of, forcing myself a little bit. But I am still, struggling a little bit with that thing that you say about trying to enjoy it as well. Like you say, there's that balance. So it's really cool to hear like your process, and how that you kind of give yourself a like, I'm on the train, I've got 5 minutes, I've got to like get it out.
The pressure thing like can really just get your nervous system going, like, oh, okay, I've got to get this done, rather than sit here going over and over and
it's like, do you want to still have this after work, like to open up your phone and be like, oh, I haven't finished this yet? I know how that feels. Does it feel good? So good on you, man. You've got done a lot of awesome things, and really keen for these new books ideas that you've got.
Well, now I've kind of spoken about it, so that's at least, it's a bit of pressure there. I'd be like, okay, now I gotta do it.
By the way, it's due on Monday. So.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Ricky. How can people find all of your things besides walking around the streets of Melbourne?
Well, while I'm in Brisbane, I'll be putting a few up.
Nice.
And then just boyunderthebridge.com is the main blog, but then for like short form and the poetry pieces, just at boyunderthebridge, one word, on Instagram, and on Facebook typing in boyunderthebridge. But it's all there. And one thing that I write on my tagline is like, here for friends, not followers. So I really enjoy anyone that wants to like follow along and connect, and actually like what we've done is like cheer each other on, because it's incredibly motivating to see surround yourself by people, and like we absorb each other's creative energy, keep yourself accountable. So welcome to any connection and
that's awesome
stuff. But thanks for having me.
No worries. And so your books, are they, or the book and the, what do you call the second piece?
The poetry sign.
Okay.
So people through Instagram, they can contact me and I can just post one out. They fit into like a standard envelope, and it only cost me $1, so I'm happy to send people out one of those. And then the book itself, Living in Cream, I'm out of hard copies now, but the ebook version is free. It's like just a PDF on boyunderthebridge.com, and you just put in your email address and you get it sent to you, and then you can read it on any digital device and stuff.
We'll pop that in the description.
Cool. Awesome.
Thanks for your time, Ricky.
Thanks, man.